The night I woke up and saw the thing standing in my hallway, I realized the house had been watching me the whole time. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just lay there, frozen in the dark, staring at the silhouette that shouldn't have been there. The air felt heavy, almost dense, like the darkness itself had weight. Slow breathing echoed through the hallway. Not mine slow, controlled, as if whatever stood there enjoyed the moment. A faint creak came from the old wooden floorboards, a tired complaint that lingered too long, almost deliberate. My heartbeat throbbed in my ears, slow at first, then faster, as the figure's outline grew sharper in the faint wash of moonlight. It was tall, too tall, shoulders slumped forward, limbs hanging as if they had no bones at all, a darkened shape with a head tilted slightly to the side, like it was studying me. And then, in the quiet, I heard it. My name, not whispered, not spoken, but exhaled, as though the breath behind it came from something that had never been human. The sound didn't echo, it clung. It wrapped around the walls. It seeped into my bones. And in that moment, the terror wasn't just fear. It was a palpable realization, simmering just beneath the surface. Something had been here long before me. Something had been watching long before I ever opened my eyes to see it. And the worst part, I wasn't surprised that I finally noticed. Because behind the scenes, something darker was lurking. Something far more sinister than anything I could have imagined. Something that had been waiting. Patiently. Quietly. Hungry. I blinked once. And the figure shifted. Not with a step. Not with a movement. It simply appeared a fraction closer to my bedroom doorway, as if the shadows had folded and carried it forward. I felt myself spiraling, my thoughts scattering as my chest tightened. Every instinct screamed to run, to get out, to escape whatever was silently, deliberately coming closer. And just as the figure leaned forward, just as it revealed that it had indeed been there before, the scene cuts, darkness returns, and now we go back to where it all began. I moved into the house 3 days earlier, a simple rental. Old, wooden, slightly crooked, but affordable, and in a quiet neighborhood. I told myself the place just needed time to feel like home, though something about it felt hollow, not empty, just hollow, like the walls held their breath when I walked by. The landlord barely spoke during the walkthrough. He handed me the keys, gave a tight smile, and avoided eye contact as he left. Looking back, his silence feels less like awkwardness and more like guilt. My first night was quiet, too quiet. When you're alone in a new place, every sound feels magnified. The wind brushing the glass, the soft hum of pipes settling. But as the hours slipped by, a new sound began threading through the silence. A tapping, soft at first, irregular, like something brushing its fingers against the inside of the wall. I sat up in bed, listening. Tap, tap, tap. A pause, then another tap. I tried to laugh it off. Houses make noise. Old pipes. Old wood. That's what I told myself. But then the tapping changed. It became intentional. The moment I turned my head toward the wall, the tapping stopped. Completely. As if whatever caused it knew I was listening. A chill ran down my back. I reached out and placed my palm against the cold paint, trying to convince myself it was nothing. That's when I heard it. A whisper. Faint, thin, close. It sounded like someone saying hello. My breath hitched. I froze with my hand still on the wall, my skin prickling from wrist to shoulders. It didn't happen again that night, but the cold spot near my bedroom door lingered, a strange patch of air that felt like it didn't belong to the rest of the room. I tried to sleep. I tried to ignore the feeling of eyes on me. I tried to ignore the sensation that something was quietly, deliberately brewing behind the scenes. But around 3 a.m., just when my eyelids began to drift, I heard it. A gentle knock. Not loud, not rushed, just knock. A pause, and then another soft knock on my bedroom door. That night, I woke up because someone knocked gently on my bedroom door. For a moment, I convinced myself it had to be a dream. People hear things when they're half asleep, Muffled sounds, echoes of their own thoughts, the tail end of a nightmare. I lay still, eyes half shut, trying to sink back into sleep, telling myself the knock I heard was just my brain misfiring. But then it came again. Knock. Soft. Measured. Too delicate to be the wind. I opened my eyes, expecting everything to feel normal. But the air had changed. It hung heavy with an unsettling stillness, like the room was holding its breath right along with me. For a full 10 seconds, I just stared at my bedroom door. Then, creak. The latch clicked, slow and deliberate, and the door began to drift open on its own. The sound was painfully long, stretching through the silence like something was pushing the door from the other side inch by inch. I pushed myself up on my elbows, heart clawing at my throat. The hallway beyond the doorway wasn't dim, it was pitch black. A suffocating kind of dark. The kind that swallowed up every shape, every edge, every hint of depth. I whispered into the emptiness. Hello? My voice didn't echo. It felt swallowed. Then something moved. Not a step, not a shift. A glide. A tall, impossibly tall shape drifted past the doorway. Not fast, not rushed. Just moving with a sickening grace that made every instinct in me recoil. Its head brushed near the top of the doorframe. Its limbs dragged against the floor. And its shadow. God, its shadow stretched wrong. Too long, too warped. As if the shape behind it was bending the air itself. I didn't breathe. I couldn't. The figure didn't turn toward me. It didn't acknowledge me. It simply passed the open doorway, vanishing deeper into the darkness that had no business being that dark. But halfway through its impossible movement, it changed. It lowered itself. Slowly, deliberately. The tall frame folding down like a puppet with severed strings, joints bending, outward, limbs twisting into angles that should have shattered bone. That's when I realized, whatever it was, it crawled instead of walked. Its hands scraped along the wood, not loudly, soft, almost gentle, like it didn't want to disturb the silence too much. I clamped my hand over my mouth, trying not to make a sound as the thing disappeared completely into the darkness on the far end of the hall. I wanted to move, to get up, to slam the door shut, but my body refused. Every muscle locked, my nerves spiraling into a panicked buzz. I must have stayed frozen like that for hours, or maybe it was minutes. Time felt warped, distorted by the heavy silence pressing in from the hallway. The cold spot near the doorway grew stronger, seeping across the floor like a tide rolling toward me. Then, nothing. Just darkness. Just quiet. When the sun finally pushed its way through my window, weak and pale, I felt my lungs loosen enough to finally breathe again. I sat up slowly, terrified to look. But I had to. The bedroom door was still open, wide open, as if inviting something back in. I told myself I imagined everything. Sleep paralysis, a nightmare. My brain fills the quiet with shadows that weren't really there. But that night, just as the clock slid past 3, the knocking started again. Soft, patient, expecting. The second day in that house felt off. Even with sunlight pouring through the windows, the air carried this quiet heaviness, like something was lingering unseen. I tried to distract myself, make breakfast, unpack a little, pretend the night before was nothing worth remembering. But there was this palpable tension drifting through the rooms, as if the house itself was waiting for me to slip back into silence. It wasn't until late afternoon, when I heard a faint rattle under the floorboards, near the bedroom dresser, that the unease started to brew again. At first I thought it was just the wood settling. Old house problems, right? But the sound wasn't random. It was rhythmic, a soft, repeating tap, almost like something was shifting beneath the floor, trying to get out. I knelt down, pressed my palm against the board, and the tapping stopped instantly. Just like the first night. That silence. It always stopped when I paid attention. Curiosity got the better of me. Or maybe it wasn't curiosity. Maybe it was the feeling that something in this house was guiding me, nudging me towards something I wasn't meant to see. The floorboard was loose. I wedged my fingers under the edge and lifted it. Dust scattered into the air. But only from the wood, not from what was underneath. There, lying perfectly centered in the hollow space between the joists, was a photograph. Old, yellowed around the edges, the kind of photo that should have been brittle with age. But when I picked it up, it wasn't dusty, not even a little. Someone had placed it there recently. My stomach tightened. The picture showed a bedroom, not mine, but close enough in layout that my brain immediately compared the angles. There was a person lying on the bed, fast asleep, turned toward the camera. A shiver crawled down my spine as I squinted. The angle the photo was taken from. It meant the photographer was standing inside that room, right beside the bed, but that wasn't the worst part. Because in the far right corner of the photo, blending almost perfectly with the darkness, was a figure. Tall, thin, its arms grazing the floor. Exactly like the one I saw in the hallway. It leaned toward the sleeping person, its head tilted, as if listening to their breath. I flipped the photo over, my hands trembling just enough for the edges to scrape against my skin. Someone had written on the back. Small, thin strokes, like the handwriting of someone who didn't want to be noticed. It watches you too. I froze, every hair on my body lifted, my skin chilled, my heartbeat rising in sharp, uneven spikes. I don't know how long I just sat there on the floor, staring at those 4 words that felt more like a warning than anything else. I tried to swallow, but my throat was dry. The air shifted behind me, a soft change, the slightest shift in pressure, but enough for my instincts to flare and my pulse to hammer in my chest. Slowly, very slowly, I lifted my head, and then I heard it, a faint, ragged breathing, coming from inside the closet behind me. Not steady, not human, a wet, uneven exhale, like something huge and hungry, was trying to hold perfectly still, but couldn't. Something darker was lurking behind that thin wooden door, something far more sinister, and it was waiting for me to turn around. I stayed frozen on the floor, staring at the closet door like it could swallow me whole if I blinked. That breathing behind it. It didn't fade. If anything, it grew more palpable, more deliberate, like whatever was inside realized I was listening. I didn't want to move. I didn't even want to breathe. But the closet door decided for me. Click. The latch slid on its own. Creak. The door eased open an inch, then 2, then 3, the darkness inside bleeding into the room like ink spreading through water. A cold draft leaked out from the crack. Not a normal cold. Bone-deep cold. The kind that feels like it's coming from someplace much older than the walls around it. I stared into that narrow gap, expecting to see the familiar row of hanging clothes, but they barely moved. Not even a sway. They weren't the source of that breathing. Slowly I stood, forcing one foot in front of the other until I reached the closet. My hand hovered near the edge of the door, shaking enough that I could hear the faint rustle of my sleeve. I nudged it open. The clothes parted slightly. Behind them was darkness, not a wall, not the back of the closet, a gap, a narrow crawl space I had never noticed, tight, suffocating, a tunnel carved out behind the drywall, like someone had hollowed out the house piece by piece and didn't want anyone to know. The breathing had stopped. And honestly, I would have preferred it hadn't. Silence was worse. Silence meant it was waiting. I crouched and peered inside. A faint flicker of light, or maybe reflection, shimmered deep in the tunnel. Not bright, just enough to draw the eye the way a spider does when it catches the moonlight. Swallowing hard, I crawled forward. The wood felt scratched beneath my palms, as if nails had raked through it over and over again. The air grew colder with every inch, and there was this underlying smell, damp, metallic, like old breath trapped in closed spaces. After maybe 10 feet, the tunnel opened up into a small room, barely big enough for someone to sit in. No windows, no furniture, just walls. Walls covered in photographs. Hundreds. Each photo taped with careful precision, edges aligned, forming this horrific mosaic of sleeping people in different beds, different rooms, different nights. Some are old, some recent. My stomach twisted as my eyes darted across them. Every person was asleep. Every angle was taken from inside their bedroom. just like the photo I'd found under the floorboard, just like mine. Then my gaze caught on one image. Fresh edges, different lighting, and the mattress in the picture. It was my bed. My breathing hitched as I stepped closer, fingertips trembling as I lifted the photo from the wall. It was me, sleeping. Taken from the foot of my bed, taken last night. The blanket slightly shifted from my leg. My face turned toward the camera. My eyes closed, unaware. But the corner of the picture, that's what froze my blood. There was something else in the frame. A shadow, tall, bent. Its head was barely visible near the edge of the image, like it was leaning over me, watching me breathe. I lowered the photo slowly, trying not to lose control of my own breath. That's when I felt it. Behind me, a scrape, soft but unmistakable, like fingertips dragging themselves backward across the wood of the tunnel. I felt someone crawl away into the darkness. The tunnel behind me had gone completely silent again, but the silence didn't feel empty. It felt crowded, occupied, like something had flattened itself against the shadows, waiting for me to turn around. My heart hammered as a whisper drifted from the tunnel, low, close, wet, and unmistakably familiar with the shape of my name. It whispered it like a secret, like a promise, like it had whispered it many times before. My entire body jolted. Instinct shattered whatever fear had been anchoring me in place. I turned and scrambled back into the tunnel, panic roaring through my ears. My elbows slammed against the walls, knees scraping, hands clawing forward as I tried to escape. Behind me, the sound, that crawling, fast, desperate, closer. Something was chasing me, something that knew the tunnel better than I did. I burst out of the closet, stumbling onto the bedroom floor, nearly collapsing as I slammed the closet door shut with both hands. But even through the wood, I could hear it, the slow, deliberate scrape of something dragging itself against the inside, getting closer to the door. After I forced the closet door shut, I dragged my dresser in front of it, then the chair, then anything heavy enough to feel like a barrier. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. My breath kept coming out in these short, uneven bursts, like the house was squeezing the air out of me piece by piece. For a long minute, nothing moved. No scratching, no crawling, no whispering, just silence. But it wasn't the comforting kind. It was the kind of silence that sits in a room like a presence, watching, waiting, sizing you up. The sun had died by then, sinking behind the trees outside, and the room fell into this sickly half-darkness where every corner felt deeper than it should have been. I turned on the lamp, then another, then even the hallway light, just to push the shadows back. I thought maybe I could stay awake until morning. Just push through the fear. But exhaustion hit me like a weight, and before I realized it, I had drifted into a shallow, uneasy sleep. It didn't last. I woke up with the sudden, sharp feeling that someone was staring at me. My eyes snapped open. The air felt wrong again. Heavy, charged, as if something in the room was holding its breath, but only because it was waiting for me to breathe first. I lay perfectly still, ears straining. At first, I thought the noise I heard was the house settling, a faint crackle, a tiny shift. Then it grew. Scratch, slow, deliberate, inside the walls. My heart thudded once, hard enough to hurt. The scratching moved, traveling from one side of the room to the other, following the contour of the wall like something was dragging its nails along the inside, mapping out every inch between us. I pushed myself upright, gripping the blanket like it could protect me. The scratching stopped. The silence pressed in again. Then came the shadow. At first it was just a small shape under the bedroom door. I thought maybe it was from the hallway light, but then it stretched, longer, wider, darkening the crack beneath the door like something enormous was standing just inches away on the other side. I whispered, "Please, don't." My voice sounded thin, useless. The shadow didn't move. Then, a hand slid underneath the door. Long fingers, too long. The tips dragged across the floorboards, feeling their way toward me inch by inch, joints twitching like the bones inside weren't put together right. I froze, breath caught in my throat, the hand flexed, each finger cracked, bending slowly, then bending farther and farther. The hand bent the wrong way, like it wasn't human. A low creaking sound came from the hallway, not from the floor but from joints twisting and shifting as if the whole thing was trying to flatten itself enough to push under the door. I scrambled back off the bed, knocking into the nightstand and sending the lamp crashing to the floor. The fingers reacted instantly, stretching farther toward the noise, reaching, searching. I lunged for the dresser barricading the closet and shoved it with all the strength panic could give me. It screeched across the floorboards, and I dragged it toward the bedroom door, blocking the bottom edge so nothing else could snake under it. Then the chair, then the suitcase, then the laundry basket. My breath was ragged, chest tight, body shaking. The hand withdrew slowly. The shadow retreated. The silence grew thicker. Whatever was out there didn't leave. It just waited. I gripped the doorknob, ready to run, but before I could turn it, the house shifted again. A soft tremor rolled through the wall behind me. Subtle, almost delicate, like something brushing its way through the wooden beams. I closed my eyes, hoping it would stop. It didn't. A whisper seeped through the cracks of the closet door. Faint, shaky, too close. Come here. My entire body went cold. It sounded like me, my voice, my tone, my exact pitch and breath, but stretched thin, like someone had dragged my words across a rusted piece of metal. Come, here. I stepped back, refusing to go near the closet again. My throat tightened. No, I whispered, barely audible. From the crawl space, no, then again distorted, new. The mimicry wasn't delayed. It wasn't accidental. It was copying me deliberately, studying me. I forced myself to speak again, voice shaking. Why are you doing this? From inside the walls, it responded instantly. Why are you doing this? Then deeper, wetter, something else underneath the mimic. Why are you doing this? My knees wobbled. The floor felt like it tilted beneath me, the dread spiraling higher, tighter, more suffocating. I needed to know I wasn't imagining it. I fumbled for my phone, opened the recorder, and pointed it toward the crack beneath the closet door. What do you want? I whispered. Silence. Then, what do you want? Followed by layers of voices. Multiple tones, multiple breaths. Some whispering over each other, some echoing, some dripping like wet gravel sliding through a pipe. I ended the recording with shaking hands and hit playback. The sound that came back wasn't what I heard in the room. It was worse. Under my voice, under the mimic, under the distorted copies, were other voices, dozens. Some sounded too old. Some are too childlike. Some are too broken to belong to anything living. They whispered over each other like a crowd pressing against the inside of the walls, begging to be heard. Then one voice, clear, sharp, and disturbingly calm, spoke directly into the microphone. He's awake now. He sees you. I dropped the phone. That was it. That was the moment something inside me snapped, and fear became survival. I grabbed my backpack, my keys, anything within reach. I didn't care what I left behind. I just knew I had to leave this house. Right now. Soft, breathy, close to mic whisper. If you're still awake, listen carefully. Stories like this don't end well. Things that watch you tend to follow you. So before you continue, you might want to subscribe for protection. Beat of silence. Now, back to the story. I stumbled out of the house with my backpack half open, heart slamming so hard it felt like it bruised the inside of my ribs. The air outside hit me like a shock, cool, real, safe. Or at least safer than whatever had whispered my voice back to me. I didn't plan where I was going. My legs just took me next door. The elderly man who lived there, I'd seen him once or twice, always sitting on his porch, never waving back, looked up as soon as I stepped into his yard. Not surprised, not confused, more like resigned, like he'd been waiting for this. "You came out," he said quietly, standing with a stiffness that made his bones look like they were protesting every movement. "That's good. Not many do." I swallowed hard. Something is in the walls of that house." His face changed instantly, not shocked. Scared. Really scared. A living kind of fear. A memory kind. He motioned me over quickly, almost urgently. "Lower your voice," he whispered. I stepped closer. "What's going on in there?" The old man's eyes shifted toward my house. He wouldn't look at it for more than a second, like even glancing at it would invite something over. "You're the first person to rent that place since the last one disappeared," he murmured. "Young man, quiet. Moved in, lasted maybe 3 weeks. What happened to him?" The man shook his head. "No one knows. One night his truck was still in the driveway, but he wasn't in the house, doors locked, lights on." He paused. "But folks, around here, we know it wasn't a normal disappearance." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a trembling whisper. "That thing in your walls, it isn't new, it isn't human, and it feeds on attention." My skin prickled so sharply it hurt. "Feeds on attention?" I repeated. "When you notice it, when you listen to it, when you're afraid of it." His jaw clenched. "Every bit of fear you give it makes it stronger, makes it bolder." My chest tightened. "It copies voices." The man nodded immediately, shiveringly. "It studies whoever lives there. Watch at night, calls to them, sounds like others." Then he looked at me, his eyes suddenly wet and terrified. "And the worst part, it knocks." A chill spread through me, crawling up my neck like ice fingers. He grabbed my wrist, surprisingly strong for his age. "Listen carefully to me," he whispered, breath shaking. "Don't answer if it knocks." My throat closed up for a second, because I had already heard it. So I said it. "It already has." The man's face collapsed into absolute horror. He actually stepped back, hand over his mouth, shaking his head like I'd just told him I'd swallowed poison. "Oh God." He breathed. "Then you don't have time." "What do you mean?" I asked, though my gut already knew. He glanced at the sinking sun, the sky growing dimmer by the second. "You need to leave before dark. I'm serious. Don't go back inside. Don't pack. Don't think. Just go." "Why? What happens after dark?" He swallowed hard. "The house wakes up, and it won't let you walk out again." I didn't want to go back inside. Every instinct I had, every hair on my arms, begged me not to. But everything I owned was still in that house, and part of me thought maybe I could be quick. Just grab a bag, a few essentials, and leave before the sun disappears completely. The moment I stepped inside, the door closed behind me with a soft, deliberate click. The house felt wrong, like it was aware of me, like something had woken up inside the walls and was listening to every breath. "Just pack," I whispered to myself, trying not to look down the hallway where I'd once seen that towering silhouette. I headed to the bedroom, but the whispering started the second I reached for my drawers. Faint at first, like tiny breaths behind the plaster. Then clearer. "Follow me." Room to room, never louder than a murmur, but never farther than 2 steps behind me. At first I thought it was random noise, some ghostly static, but then my stomach dropped when I realized it wasn't just whispering. It was saying things only I knew. My name, my hometown, the nickname my mother called me when I was 5. The secret I'd never told anyone, not even my closest friends, whispered in a voice that slid through the walls like oil. Every time I froze, the whispers went quiet, as if listening to my heartbeat. Then they started again, closer, more confident. "You remember what you did. You remember that night. You never told anyone." "I know." My heartbeat thudded against my ribs so hard it made my vision pulse. I backed away from the wall, hands shaking. "This isn't real," I whispered. "It's just copying sounds." But it wasn't copying something it had heard. It was digging. Into memories, into shame, into the things I'd buried so deep they never had names. The whisper drifted behind my left shoulder, almost tender. "I've watched you sleep." I spun toward the doorway, Nothing. But then, a breath, warm, directly behind me, and the voice that filled the room was my own. Perfect pitch, perfect tone, except stretched just a little too thin, like something wearing my voice like a mask. It said softly, "Don't leave." My knees almost gave out. I turned slowly, my throat tight, every muscle frozen. No one was there. But the whisper of my own voice slid through the dark. "Stay with me." Then, slam, the lights went out. All of them. The entire house fell into suffocating darkness so thick it felt almost physical, pressing against my eyes, swallowing sound, swallowing breath. And in that crushing blackness, something exhaled, right next to me. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. The darkness felt alive, like it was brewing around me, heavy, swirling, almost pulsing with a heartbeat that didn't belong to me. My hands fumbled over the nightstand until my fingers closed around the cold metal of my small flashlight. I clicked it on. A weak beam cut through the dark, trembling with my hand, and that's when I saw it. At the very end of the hallway, tall, thin, too thin. It didn't stand the way a person stands. It hung, like something suspended from invisible strings, limbs dangling at angles that made my stomach churn. Its skin looked stretched, tight and pale, almost translucent in the flashlight's jittering glow. And then it moved, not by stepping, not by walking, but by crawling, fast, wrong, its elbows bending outward, its knees pushing behind it, joints rotating, like they were searching for the right way to exist but never finding it. Every movement came with a soft, wet tapping sound on the old wooden floor. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't even scream. Its head slowly tilted upward, like it was sniffing the air, savoring the moment. Then it smiled. Too wide, far too wide. A thin crack of a grin splitting across its face until I could see teeth that looked small and human. But there were so many of them, layered behind one another like rows of pale needles. And when it finally spoke, its voice was gentle, almost polite. "You shouldn't see me yet." The words floated down the hallway like a breeze, but there was something behind them. Something dark, something spiraling out from inside the walls, something that had been waiting. My light shook harder. Its head twisted backward to look at me. Slowly, so slowly. The neck didn't turn. It wound, like a rope tightening. Bones cracked. Something snapped, and its head completed a full backwards rotation until its face was staring directly at me, upside down, that same awful smile plastered on it. Then it paused, just long enough for me to think it might sink back into the shadows. But instead, it started running, not crawling, not scuttling, running on all fours with impossible speed, its limbs smacking the floor like a spider made of broken human parts. I stumbled backward, heart slamming against my ribs hard enough to hurt. The flashlight flickered. The creature closed the distance in seconds. I bolted. I didn't think so. I didn't look. I just sprinted down the hallway, nearly slipping, slamming into the bedroom door and shoving it shut behind me so hard the frame rattled. Then I locked it. Deadbolt, latch, whatever I could reach. The second the lock clicked, something hit the door. Not hard, just a soft, testing tap tap tap, like knuckles or claws, tracing the wood. Then a whisper slid under the door, thin as a thread, too early. The tapping at the door stopped. For a heartbeat, the silence was worse. It felt intentional, like the creature was listening, waiting for me to breathe, waiting for the fear in my chest to peak. Then the first claw scraped across the wood. Not a tap. A long, slow drag. Shirk. The sound was thin at first, like a knife testing the grain. Then it grew deeper, harsher, until the whole door shuddered under the pressure. My pulse jumped. Dust trembled from the top of the frame. Then another claw joined it. Shirk. Shirk. The scraping built into a rhythm, slow, steady, deliberate, like something, savoring the moment, carving patterns into my only barrier. And then the walls began to shake, literally shaking, like something inside them had woken up. Whispers, multiplied behind the plaster. Dozens of voices, all overlapping, all rising in a swelling, spiraling murmur. Some whispered my name, some whispered nonsense, some whispered in tones too deep to be human. It felt like the house itself was breathing, like it was alive, like it was hungry. I backed away from the door, heart slamming so hard it felt palpable, like it filled the whole room. Then, a soft, gentle creak behind me. No, 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 no. I turned. The closet door was slowly opening, not pushed, not kicked, just easing open as though someone inside was politely letting themselves out. A thin hand reached through the gap first, fingers long, pale, and trembling like they were excited. The whispers fell into unison. And from the closet, a voice drifted out. "Honey, open the door. It's me," my mother's voice. Perfectly imitated. Soft, warm, comforting, but strained at the edges, like something was replaying memories it didn't understand. I shook my head, backing away so fast I nearly tripped. "That's not real," I whispered. Immediately, the voice repeated it back to me. Same tone, same breath, but stretched, distorted, like it was smiling while speaking. "That's not real." Then, "Let me in, sweetheart." The closet door creaked open wider. I didn't wait another second. I lunged for the window, threw up the latch, and shoved it open so hard it bounced off the frame. Cold night air flooded in, the first thing that didn't feel hostile in hours. I didn't think about the drop. I didn't think about injuries. I just hurled myself through the window. Glass cracked behind me, not breaking, just flexing, like something had slammed into it from the inside. I hit the ground hard, pain firing up my ankle, but adrenaline pushed me forward. I ran across the yard, stumbling through weeds, every shadow feeling like it breathed. The whispers spilled out of the house, not loud, but following, wrapping around me, calling my name. I sprinted toward the only light I could see, the faint porch lamp of the elderly neighbor's house. My lungs burned, my legs shook, but I kept running, pounding across the gravel driveway. When I reached the porch steps, something made me turn. I wish I hadn't, because standing in the window of my bedroom, the very one I had just escaped through, was the creature. Its long body hunched, its head tilted, its smile stretched almost ear to ear. And when it saw me looking, its grin widened. I looked back and saw the creature standing in my window, smiling. The neighbor insisted I call the police. I didn't want to. Every instinct told me the house wouldn't appreciate strangers stepping inside, but by sunrise, 2 patrol cars were already parked outside the old place. They moved through rooms with slow, cautious steps, their flashlights slicing across peeling wallpaper and dust hanging in the air like drifting ash. I stayed on the porch, refusing to cross the threshold again. Just looking at the house made my stomach twist. The windows felt like eyes. After nearly half an hour, one of the officers came back out, frowning. "We didn't find anything," he said. His voice carried that tone people use when they think you're overreacting. But then he added, "You should see this." I followed him only as far as the front door. I wouldn't go deeper than that. I watched from the frame as he pointed his flashlight toward the open crawl space. Entrance. The same narrow passage I'd seen something disappear into days earlier. Empty. Completely empty. No bedding. No belongings. No traces of the creature. Not a single footprint in the dust. Like no one, no thing, had ever crawled in there at all. But the walls were different. Polaroid photos still clung to the boards, edges curling slightly, but the images weren't the same as before. The officers didn't understand. They thought they were old tenant photos. But I knew, because every photo, every single one, was new. One showed me standing in the hallway. Another captured me sitting up in bed, eyes wide, staring at something just out of frame. Another showed me peering into the closet, jaw trembling. The camera angle was always from a dark corner, or halfway behind a doorway. And then, my stomach dropped. I saw the last row of photos. Pictures of me running away last night, my legs mid-stride, My face twisted in fear. The creature was nowhere in sight, but the framing was from high above, like someone had been watching from the roof, or the attic, or the dark behind the window. And then, the final photo. My breath caught, because that one wasn't taken in the old house. It showed me asleep, in my new room. Even the blanket pattern was unmistakable. I had slept there only a few hours earlier, thinking I was finally safe. The photo was crisp, close, taken from a vantage point someone would only have if they were standing right next to my bed. A deep cold washed through me, sinking all the way to my bones. The officers kept talking, saying something about fingerprints, about formal reports, about mental health checks, but their voices faded into static, because something else began echoing in my head, a sound I hadn't heard since the night I escaped, a sound I hoped I'd never hear again, a gentle, deliberate knocking. It came from inside my memory at first, a phantom noise, but then I realized it wasn't in my head at all. It was real. It was happening, right now, at my new home. 3 slow knocks. Tap, tap, tap. I swallowed hard. My final thought was barely a whisper. Last night, I heard knocking again. But I don't live alone anymore. Not after what I saw in the photo fade out.